allegations about what's happening.
I'm going to do something that is unthinkable.
Our next case is by far the most requested topic that I have ever received on this channel, as it seems to strike a chord with so many who watched the situation unfold live. It all started on the evening of June 25th, 2007, the night in which the WWE had been preparing to air a live
Ich habe irgendeinen Kommentar, irgendwas bei diesem Part ist, glaube ich, gemutet oder rausgeschnitten oder so, weil er Copyright-Probleme hatte. Habe ich noch eben in den Kommentaren gelesen.
3-hour program known as Raw. The event was set to feature their usual star-studded list of wrestlers going head-to-head in Corpus Christi, Texas.
Ich habe so unfassbar gerne früher WWE geguckt.
Though the morning of, out of the group of those star wrestlers, one man was missing. Chris Benoit.
Oh, Chris Benoit. Ja,
according to fellow wrestler
ich.
Chavo Guerrero, he had received a voicemail from Benoit 2 days prior, where he was told that Benoit's wife Nancy and son Daniel had come down with food poisoning, before telling another co-worker the following day that Nancy was so sick that she had been vomiting blood. Guerrero would go on to state that the following morning he received vague text from Benoit, with some simply stating his address and another giving directions to where the dogs were being kept, and how the side door to the house was left unlocked. Texts that were sent around 3 a.m. and ignored by Guerrero, as he knew he would be seeing Benoit in just a few hours, given that he was going to be picking him up at the airport in preparation for the show. Though he would never hear from Benoit again.
Good evening. In reality, WWE superstar Chris Benoit, his wife Nancy, and their son Daniel are dead.
With the program growing nearer on the 25th, news would be relayed to the WWE that Chris Benoit, along with Nancy and Daniel, had been found dead within their home. The news came as a shock to the entirely scheduled Raw event. The decision was made to cancel the matches and instead showcase a tribute to the famed wrestler who so suddenly lost his life.
Weil man zu dem Zeitpunkt noch nicht wusste, was wirklich dort vorgegangen ist. Weil zu diesem Zeitpunkt war man davon ausgegangen, dass das Ganze einfach nur, ne, dass es einen Unfall gab oder ein Unglück oder ne.
Life. And so on the evening of June 25th, 2007, the WWE would reflect on some of Chris Benoit's best moments in the circuit, along with their biggest stars giving personal accounts of just how much Benoit meant to them, with it all happening live and in real time the very night that Chris was found dead. Throughout the program, wrestlers like Stone Cold Steve Austin, John Cena, and CM Punk, who was originally scheduled to fight Benoit that night, shared heartfelt memories of just how good a man Chris Benoit truly was, emphasizing his talent, work ethic, and the love he had for his family.
There was respect. It meant everything to him. Respect for this business, respect for the fans, respect for the wrestlers, respect for his family, respect for himself.
And for a moment, this all seemed to be exactly what the wrestling world needed, to bring everyone together in remembrance. But near the end, a shift seemed to occur following an interview given by William Regal, whose comments towards Benoit felt far more reserved than the others before him, who poured their hearts out over their fallen friend.
At a later date, I'll be quite happy to sit here and tell you all the things about Chris Benoit that I'd like to tell you. But now all I'm willing to say is that Chris Benoit was undoubtedly the hardest working man in professional wrestling.
According to some watching the program, the interview did feel a bit out of place, and apparently slightly threw off the vibe of the remaining show, as things felt far more stiff and reserved than at its opening. And there was good reason for this. When Regal was prepared.
Ja, wenn man sich das vorstellt, dass da nichts abgewartet wird, sondern man sagt die Show ab, man macht nur jetzt, dass die alle aus dem Nichts da ihre positiven Erinnerungen an Benoit sagen sollen, ohne zu wissen, was dort vorgefallen ist.
Preparing to do this live interview, he was allegedly approached by fellow wrestler John Layfield, who pulled him aside and asked, "You think he had anything to do with it?" Initially, the thought had never even crossed his mind. In fact, he had a heartfelt message fully prepared to read in the moments leading to his interview. But something about that question made him pause, leading to his subsequent words being rather short and cautious, as the hesitation led to the creeping thought of, what if he really did have something to do with it? A thought that very few at the time had even considered, which looking back seems so surreal. As for those familiar with the case, you know exactly where this is headed.
We're now looking at this case and ruling it as a double homicide suicide. Evidence in the home leads us to believe that Mr. Benoit had murdered his wife by asphyxiation. Sometime shortly after that, the same for his son Daniel.
Over the previous days before Chris's tribute was aired, he would be the one to take the lives of his wife, son, and eventually himself. Benoit did so by drugging and strangling his son and wife, while leaving Bibles
Wie
by
Nero
their
eben schon
side.
geschrieben hat, sein Name wurde halt überall auch aus der WWE verbannt. Die haben sich einfach entschieden, wie sie mit der Situation umgehen wollen, und zwar indem sie alles totschweigen.
Seemingly as a result of some type of mental breakdown. To this day, an exact motive is still not fully understood, but it likely had to do with a combination of multiple factors, with the most glaring being the head trauma that Benoit had suffered as a result of his profession. As following his death, Benoit's brain was studied by a neurologist who would go on to state that Benoit's brain was so severely damaged, it resembled the brain of an 85-year-old Alzheimer's patient. The gruesome scene uncovered at the family home by the hands of Chris Benoit makes this whole memorial program for him just seem so much more chilling, as not even 24 hours later, the man that was being so highly praised as a loving family man would be revealed to have been the one behind his own family's murder. And as disturbing as this all is, there's plenty of other chilling moments left behind by Benoit, with perhaps none more eerie than the promo he shot for another Raw event just a few years before his death.
My wife and my children will not be watching Raw, because I am going to do something that is unthinkable. I'm going to leave you with my anger. Sleep well.
Das ist jetzt ja Show, also das hat er wahrscheinlich auch nicht ausgesucht, diesen Show-Part. Das ist ja von der WWE und von den Showschreibern gemacht, aber es ist halt natürlich jetzt gruselig passend.
July 7th, 2012.
Si dicen la verdad hasta el final, podrían ganar 50,000 soles.
Television host Beto Ortiz opens up the very first episode of a brand new TV show called El Valor de la Verdad, or The Value of Truth. Throughout its airtime, the show would challenge contestants to answer a series of questions.
Das gleiche, was wir eben geguckt haben, nur halt aus einem anderen Land.
Honestly, while strapped to a polygraph test. The test then monitors if the person is telling the truth or not, and with each correct answer, you earn more and more money, until you either choose not to answer a question, or until you're caught lying. Though there was a catch. The questions would get increasingly more difficult and embarrassing, and all the while you're answering them, you're seated directly next to your loved ones, with whom the questions were often based around. The whole program is incredibly cringe-inducing, but in a way that you can't quite take your eyes off. And in Peru, The Value of Truth was poised to become a breakout hit, thanks in large part to the success of this very first episode. In it, we're introduced to the contestant Ruth Thalia Sea Sanchez, a 19-year-old call center employee hoping to gain fame from the show, while being accompanied by her parents and boyfriend Brian Romero Lavea, and they could not have selected a better inaugural participant. Up until this point, Ruth had lived her life in a state of poverty, and the type of money offered by the program would be life-changing for both herself and her family, which might explain her openness.
Frag mich, ob das unangenehmer wird, als das, was wir vorhin geguckt haben.
On air, as throughout the entire program, Ruth answers each and every question with painful honesty. In one moment, she admits that she wishes that she were white, and in another, she stated how she was often embarrassed by her parents' manners, which she says as they sat directly across from her.
Das ist ja doch relativ harmlos, ne? Dass sie bei den Manieren ihrer Eltern, dass sie das peinlich ist. Ja gut, komm. Wenn ihr gefragt werdet, findet ihr die Manieren eurer Eltern manchmal peinlich? Oder sind die euch unangenehm oder so? Was würdet ihr antworten? Ich würde ja sagen, weil meine Eltern bringen immer wieder den gleichen Witz, wenn wir essen sind und sagen: Hast du aber gut gekocht, wenn man irgendwo im Restaurant ist. Ha, ha, ha. Ja, siehst du, das finde ich nicht schlimm. Fast alle von euch sagen ja. Wenn ich mal Kinder haben sollte, dann sollen die mich auch peinlich finden.
Señor, evidentemente es una respuesta
You can feel the tension as each answer seems to drive a dagger into her parents' hearts, eventually leaving her mother in tears. And it only gets more painful from here as she was asked, "Are you with your crush until someone better arrives?" To which she says, yes, with her boyfriend watching on just feet away.
Ja, genauso unangenehm wie das andere, ne?
And following this, the questions would become more and more intrusive, with Ruth eventually having to admit that in order to pay her bills, she worked at a nightclub as a stripper, which was news to all of her loved ones who sat there stunned by the revelation, especially her boyfriend Brian. A revelation that leads us to Ruth's final question and the most painful one of all. Have you ever accepted money in exchange for sex? A question which she would answer, yes, before promptly ending her time on the show 3 questions away from the finale.
Me retiro.
Se retira.
Me retiro.
The whole ordeal left everyone, including the audience, completely stunned. On one hand, many applauded Ruth for being so honest, and on the other, she was criticized for putting her family and her boyfriend specifically through this embarrassing line of
Die wussten ja, was auf sie zukommt, wenn sie da hingehen. Das war ja nicht die erste Show von sowas, sondern es war auch schon online nachzusehen, in welche Richtung es laufen würde.
questions, broadcast for the whole country to see. The cringe-inducing episode became so popular that the station supposedly aired it each weekend for a staggering 12 weeks straight. The show and Ruth herself became instant phenomenons, and in a sense, this did bring Ruth some of the fame that she so desperately desired, making appearances on multiple news programs in the following weeks, and becoming a legitimate household name in Peru. And the finances helped her situation too, as she walked away with 15,000 sols, or about $5,800 US back then. And for a moment, it seemed as if the pain of releasing all this private information might have actually been worth it. Until the day she vanished. Out of nowhere, Ruth suddenly went radio silent, missing appointments and failing to answer her phone while her home sat vacant. For 10 days straight, there was no sign of the young star, prompting a massive search of the area she lived in, with those same loved ones that had accompanied her on The Value of Truth helping lead the search efforts. Until, eventually, police would happen across her lifeless body, buried in a shallow grave. She had died of asphyxiation, a clear-cut case of
Wahrscheinlich ihr
murder,
Freund, oder?
and there was only ever one suspect. Just before Ruth had vanished, she would make an appearance on TV, in which she appeared lower energy than normal, expressing her sadness in the fact that her and her boyfriend Brian had broken up, likely as a result of the embarrassment brought about by the show. And with this in mind, Brian had been questioned about his role in her disappearance, and eventually admit to everything. Angered by the embarrassment that Ruth had caused him in front of the entire nation, and feeling as if he was owed a certain percentage of the money that
Hurensohn. Hurensohn.
Ruth had earned, Brian would visit Ruth's home and drug her with sleeping pills before proceeding to assault her and eventually hang her. He would then bury her body in the hopes that she would never be found. Years later, Brian would be found guilty of Ruth's murder and receive the punishment of life in prison. Despite its very first episode leading to a prolific murder case, The Value of Truth remained a hit show for years to follow, until it would eventually fizzle out and be taken off the air, leaving in its wake a multitude of embarrassing memories, and one of the darkest moments in TV history.
Würdest du bei so einer Show mitmachen? Ich glaube nicht. Ich wüsste nichts Schlimmes, was ich getan habe, was man da fragen könnte. Aber ich glaube, das wäre es mir trotzdem nicht wert, meine Familie oder so da irgendwie reinzuziehen. Das fände ich halt, ne? Aber war ein cooles Video. War ein cooles Video. Hat Spaß gemacht zu gucken. War krank. Viel krank.